So a brief correction to something I previously said is I meant to say 400 watts of power. Sorry, not 400 kilometers over about a 1 kilometer distance. However, I also want to bring up a problem some you might be thinking about transmitting energy, and that is, what if you have really bad weather? Well, first of all, I would want to argue that bad weather is a problem for any type of vehicle with navigation and everything, but less so for the power supply of a gas-powered one. Then, for ones with drones, other drones powering other drones and exchange, it might be a problem because you have just more things flying around and navigating within it is harder. But with the power loss with lasers, there's a couple ways around it. None of these are perfect, but they might mitigate the effects. And it's hard for me to find research into this. One is, the more stations you put, the less far it has to travel, and the less it will scatter or get absorbed or lose power. So as the infrastructure grows, it becomes less of a concern. The other one is to have a little bit of battery backup power for bad weather events. And these batteries, if we make it a module, maybe they can be installed on and off. So during clear weather, we don't have them on them, but during bad weather, we have them on them. Something like that. This would mean that they don't have all the advantages though they have in clear weather, but they work about the same with distance and stuff like that. But they can't carry as much load, or they carry more load, but they can't go as far. So there'll be some trade-off with that system, basically. The other way to mitigate it, that's not having optional add-on and take on module batteries, not more towers, is that we can make the wavelengths absorbed less by, use wavelengths absorbed less by rain and snow. There's certain infrared wavelengths that are very little absorbed by them. Now they can still be scattered by certain dust particles. Everything is somewhat scattered by light, but we can lower it a lot. I was hard finding numbers, but I know for some wavelengths at certain conditions, it is almost transparent ones. But then it might not be transparent for snow, which is a lot more reflective, and snow is a lot worse. There are ones that go through snow that you can't see. Another one you can use is adaptive optics. Adaptive optics is something that's been widely, and I mean widely, used in the telescope industry. Sorry, not the telescope industry, and a couple other ones where you can change the beam property so it scatters less. And there's a variety of ways of doing this. It's complicated, but you can change the wavelengths so they scatter less. You can have a multimodal, have a complicated wave pulse that what happens is that interference causes it to scatter less. That's really, really fancy, but basically you can have, if waves can constructively or deconstructively interfere, meaning that waves can make each other more intense or less intense in places. Scattering makes the waves travel in different directions. If I exactly right put a bunch of wavelengths in the right order, in exactly the right way that they all interact in spatially, temporally, everything in distribution, when it starts to scatter for certain mediums, the interference can act like a way of unscattering it, of like refocusing it. And that's because they start hitting each other in different angles. Very complicated math, very hard to do, but they have done it. The other way is to send pulses that are more or less intense, that interact because of the intensity. It appears to it more, or they're less intense and they get absorbed better. Less because they don't excite the molecules around them as much. So you can modulate the intensity with pulses. So either send a very fast pulse that has a lot of energy that doesn't get absorbed as much, or slow pulses might be absorbed less because they're low energy. You can use focusing devices that pre-focus the light, so when it's scattered, it scatters less. Another thing you could do is make the whole thing a bigger target. Now this gets rid of it. If the beam is spreading out, it doesn't get rid of absorption problem. But if the whole thing is a bigger target, you don't have to aim it as well, and it can absorb more light that's more spread out. To make a bigger target, if you can make the whole thing out of a solar cell or something, you could do that. You could also have, if you really want to go extreme, a modular gas engine or something doing really the worst weather events or the cloudiest. You could also just try to promote better air pollution laws so it doesn't get as messed up fog, which would also save many lives and reduce the need for medicine to be delivered quickly. But let's see if that ever happens. But these are just some ideas. And I think it's important to look at, because when this will be most useful, maybe during a disaster when the weather's the worst, when you don't want people going to bad weather places. Navigating in bad weather is also very difficult. And that's actually something that lasers could do, because lasers can transmit a lot more data fast. So they could transmit potentially a lot more weather data, now that I think about it. Even with the slowing down scattering, that might not come as clear through with traditional means. Like Wi-Fi and stuff might have too much interference and from the ground station. So maybe it could transmit more weather data that I could use to figure out stuff. Navigating bad weather is really bad, but one way we could try to do it is more shape-changing wings, which 3D printing and electric aviation is looking into. But basically, and also less rigid wings. Basically, the idea is that every time you see those modern day wings change, you see those little flaps and tails and stuff, and that slows down. That makes a not smooth surface, which causes turbulence, which causes air to get sucked, which causes more flat faces and not a smooth transition, which means you lose speed. It also means that I can't change the design to a multitude of ranges and progressions that might work in different air conditions or speeds or different turns and stuff like that. If you could have a wing that changes shape much more smoothly, like a bird's wing, you would get rid of that problem. How to do that? Well, maybe a flexible 3D printed wing could change, that's not very rigid, could change automatically due to just turbulence and stuff, or winds that blow against it, pulling the wing back, making it more aerodynamic, or turbulence causing it to slightly flap or oscillate to get rid of the bigger flaps and oscillation. You could also put this materials that change shape if you put electricity to it, and you could have those materials. So that could all help navigate in bad weather by making the whole thing just more stable and not having a human being on it. Also just makes it safer. But besides making it more stable, it also makes it more energy efficient during these bad weather events compared to a traditional craft. Kind of negating some of the impacts, not all of them, but that's not really the battery. That's really more the overall design. Now, what type of now if we all conclude a engine on there that is not a battery or capacitor but burns stuff, what type would we include? Well, I argue maybe that's a type not traditional gas engine. But if we want everything to be electric, so we don't have to switch out, add a new motor or anything, there's something called a fuel cell. And fuel cells can burn a wide variety of fuels, much more than most engines. In theory, optimally. In practice, it's hard to make. That's why you need more development. But fuel cells kind of are like batteries, but instead of carrying everything in the container, you put the chemicals in, and they react, and then you let them go, and they make electricity. They're actually more efficient than the engine. They have a lot of design challenges, which is why they're not widely used. And then you also have to power the motor, whereas is where you use a lot of your power, but still electric motors are like 98% efficient, the most efficient ones, where the most efficient gas engine is like less than 30% efficient. So there is a huge energy loss, but not as much, and the best fuel cells over 90%. And they could probably maybe use in the future a wider variety of fuels, which might be better for first people living all over the world that might not have access to jet fuels or fancy fuels, or during emergencies when you might not have your stored amount of gas, you might have to run in olive oil and stuff like that. One way a lot of these ones have challenges, but maybe a spark plug could help pre-burn or pre-catalyze it to get rid of variable fuel challenges, or having one that can be just used not a long time and thrown away, just only during emergencies. Use it so it doesn't have to have a long lifespan, which is a problem with many of the fuel cells now, is that they just don't have long lifespans. So a bad fuel cell just for emergencies during bad weather might be a doable option. Well, thank you very much for listening. Please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out. Thank you very much. Goodbye.